Hey everyone, welcome to Unblock Your Career, a product school webinar. So this is about unblocking yourself. Now, what does that mean? So as PMs, we know that fostering really good relationships with your coworkers is a crucial part of being a PM. The role requires great listening skills, humility, admitting when you've done something wrong, collaborating with designers, engineers, other cross-functional folks, and empathy. But this doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a passive people pleaser. The best product leaders actually are assertive in all aspects of their career, not just their products. My name is Anna Pan. I'm a PM at Facebook, and today I'll be walking you through how to be assertive in different scenarios that may be holding you back at work. So there are three things I'm going to cover today. One is PM your promotion. The second one is call out bias. And the last one is ask for help. Let's dive right in. PMing your promotion. It's just another product. So have you ever been convinced that you would get promoted this upcoming cycle, and then for some reason it didn't happen and you weren't really sure why, and you worked really hard and you chatted with your manager, they said you had a good shot at it, and then 6 months later, the same thing happens again. The cycle keeps continuing. Well, you're not alone. This happens pretty frequently. So I'm going to talk you through how to basically prevent this from happening. So for your products, you set very clear metrics and timelines, right? So this is kind of a task manager tool. For all of your products, you write product specs, really explicitly saying what is required of the product, what are the risks. You and your engineers kind of come up with tech specs to really make sure everything is tidied up. You have milestones. What's your V1? What's your V2? What are some reach goals? What are long-term visions? And lastly, you also have stakeholder buy-in. You can't just launch anything you want without notifying anyone. So these are all things that are very crucial in a product. So why not apply that same structure and accountability that you do on your products to your promotion as well? You might be thinking, oh, it's kind of weird to think about my promotion as a product, but it really is. There's a clear outcome you want, stakeholders you need to get buy-in from. You need your manager's approval and your skip, and sometimes even all the way up to the execs. And there's work that you need to do to get there. Your promotion's not just going to happen magically, as much as you wish that, in an ideal world, your work could speak for itself. But in reality, you do have to kind of vouch for yourself and do some work to get there. So 3 tips in general on how to do this is 1, be upfront. So candidly talk to your manager and say, hey, I would like to go up for promotion this upcoming cycle. Don't just assume that they're going to know that you want to go up for promotion or that they will approach you if they think you're ready. That takes a lot of assumption in terms of a very involved manager, a very proactive manager. Oftentimes managers have multiple reports. So it's always good for you to just be upfront, proactively go up to them and give them as much of a heads up as possible so that they can help prepare you for it, as promo packages can take a while sometimes, depending on the company. So people managers often have career chats, right? You've probably all had the same career chat where somebody sits you down and says, hey, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This can be helpful depending on the situation, but I personally find it easier to think short term. So being honest with yourself and with your manager of saying, hey, I would want to have one direct report in the next 6 months, or in 1 year, I would like to get promoted to level 7. And ask them, hey, what do you think I will need from you? Or what do you think you need from me to get there? How can I prove to you that I deserve that promotion? In addition, tell them what you'll need from them. So maybe you need more mentoring and what that may look like. So work out a plan with your manager. The second tip is do the work. So just like any other project, it requires some extra effort. Don't expect your work to speak for itself. And lastly, be persistent. Follow up with your manager and with yourself, and make sure you're staying on track. So here's an example of a very simplified product roadmap, what goes into that, right? So first step is data gathering. You then get some stakeholder buy-in. You define goals and your metrics, trade-off metrics. Then you kind of clearly document everything, whether that's in tech specs, product specs, etc. Maybe they're product review decks with execs. Then you have consistent stand-ups as you're building it. and progress updates, check-ins, things like that. And finally, a retro to discuss how it went, what went well, what went poorly, to kind of help you figure out how to do it next time. So that's a product roadmap. And I would like to walk you through basically how to apply this product roadmap to a promotion roadmap. So step one, data gathering. What does this mean? So one is try to figure out what your scope is, impact, and total comp is compared to others at your level and the level above you. The reason why I'm asking also to do the level above you is because sometimes, depending on the company, they don't want you to just be excelling at your current level. They want you to already be operating at the level above you. So try to figure out, hey, in comparison to other folks at the level above me, is my scope pretty much the same? If so, I think I have a pretty good shot at this promotion maybe, or I have a stronger case. What impact have I had in terms of KRs? And then the total comp will also help you figure out where in the band you are to kind of help decide whether a promo is likely or not. Also look up what industry standard is. This will be helpful as you are negotiating with your manager and or HR. The second thing is do some research internally as well in terms of who else has gotten promoted to the level higher than you pretty recently. The reason I say recently is depending on the growth of your company, things might be changing all the time in terms of pathways. And so try to find someone maybe in the last half or even last quarter who's been promoted and ask them what it took for them to get promoted. See if they're willing to even show you their promo package. The worst they can do is say no. And finally, are there pathways? Pathways are basically a very clear written out documentation that the company may or may not give you that tells you what they expect you to operate as for each level. So what leadership skills you need to have, what KRs you need to hit, maybe things like that. Sometimes they don't exist, especially at smaller companies. If they don't, write up a draft, maybe not necessarily for the entire company, although that would be really great and kudos to you if you want to do that, but maybe just draft one that you and your manager agree to. If they do already exist, great. Make sure you and your manager fully understand each specific stipulation. Oftentimes these can be pretty vague because they're meant to span across the entire company and different orgs have different systems. So try to make them tangible. So this is very, very crucial. From personal experience, I once actually had a manager who waited until after the performance cycle to admit that they didn't really understand 2 out of 4 of the sections in the pathway. So anything that was, an area of opportunity for me in one section, they just copied and pasted in the second one. So basically double counting any strengths and weaknesses there and not actually really understanding what was going on. This is a really big no-no. Ideally, you and your manager talk about it from the very beginning, making sure that they fully understand what the pathways mean. And feel free to bring in HR to kind of ask any more detailed questions there. All right, step 2, stakeholder buy-in. So get very clear answers from your manager when you say, hey, I'd like to go up for promotion. What do you think? An answer like, we'll see, or you have a pretty good shot, just doesn't cut it. I've been in those situations before. These vague answers are things to kind of make sure that they're not really held accountable. If your manager doesn't approve of your promotion, find out as quickly as possible so you have time to find a sponsor. This could be somebody who is a peer of theirs, who you've worked with, who can vouch for your work, or maybe even your skip level boss. Secondly, make sure you're pulsing for peer feedback early on so you have time to course correct. These are people who are most likely going to have to write your peer reviews at your performance cycle anyway, and it's really good at the beginning of each half or quarter to actually pulse them continuously to make sure that any concerns of theirs are being addressed by you pretty frequently. All right, goals and metrics. So a lot of the time it's not as cut and dry, depends on which company you're at, but if it is applicable, you should be asking your manager, hey, what performance rating do I need to get, the minimum performance rating in order to be eligible for promotion? What KRs do I need to hit? Do I need to hit or exceed a specific KR percentage for which project? Next, for each project on your roadmap, ask your manager, what do I need to hit in order to get a meets expectations for this project or an exceeds expectations? This is usually even a good practice, even outside of trying to get promoted. This is something to really set expectations early on with your manager of what their expectations are for that product. Number 3, what weaknesses do I need to improve? And what stretch projects projects can I take on to showcase that? So maybe you are trying to get promoted to a people management level. So maybe you need more mentorship opportunities and informally mentor some, associate PMs. Maybe you haven't done enough client work and, designers have given you feedback that you need to be more involved in user research. Maybe you should run a few sessions. Maybe you're not really familiar with any cross-org tech debt dependencies. Maybe you should do that. Talk with your manager about it. And lastly, how can I increase my scope? So different opportunities may come up, like maybe a PM has left the company and you want to fill in for them. Or maybe your team is trying to, or has been hitting a lot of overlaps with another team's charter, and maybe it's time for you to recreate a team mission. Perhaps you need to conduct more interviews and step up since a lot of PMs aren't conducting enough interviews. Or maybe you just want to be more involved in planning at an org level. All right, so this is the fun part, clear documentation. This is very, very important. Once you and your manager have agreed to everything, make sure everything is written down. Obviously, this is not a contract. There are external factors for promotions. Even if you have the most amazing manager who is going to vouch for you and fight for you in the room, at the end of the day, there are external factors at play. Budgets, who else is up for a promotion, what the execs say, what's going on at the company. Openings at the time for maybe that level. This is not a contract, and you and your manager need to both understand that. It's not like as long as you hit all the things on this contract, you definitely deserve a promotion. However, this will put you on the right path and will at least give you a good sense of whether it's likely or not. Secondly, specify what you need from your manager to get to a good place. So you know better than anyone else what you need in terms of your weaknesses. So if you think that your product specs are the thing that you've been getting the most feedback on, maybe you should ask your manager to do a weekly spec review with you. Now, stand-ups. As you go through this quarter or this half, depending on when your performance cycle is, make sure you're doing maybe bi-weekly or monthly check-ins with your manager to see, am I on track? What could I have done better in the last 2 weeks? Of the meetings you've been in with me, could I have handled anything differently? And if you had to give me a performance rating right now, what would it be? And lastly, retro. So after you find out whether you did or did not get the promotion, try to find out why specifically. This will help you figure out what was effective. Maybe the KRs you set were really, really good, but what was not as effective is you weren't really good at pulsing for peer feedback enough, and your peer reviews were actually what was kind of holding you back from that promotion. This will definitely help structure you in moving forward. All right, so you might be saying, whoa, this sounds like a lot of work. Shouldn't my work speak for itself? In an ideal world, yes, but politics exist, and not everyone is lucky enough to have a transparent manager who will fight for you and advocate for you. So advocating for yourself is a super valuable skill that you'll need for the rest of your career. If you do all of these things, will it guarantee a promo? Of course not. But it will definitely increase your chances, and you'll understand why you did or didn't get the promo, and it'll set you up for success for the next one. All right, let's go to topic number 2, calling out bias. In this section, I'm going to teach you how to be a diplomat, not a doormat. So don't get walked on. It's hard to stand up for yourself in difficult situations. Sometimes your colleagues may interrupt you in a meeting. Maybe they take credit for your work, whether they mean to or not. Maybe they are addressing your superiors instead of you, even though you're the subject matter expert or you're the one who's done the work. I actually once conducted an interview with someone actually shadowing me, and the interviewee kept answering all of my questions directly to the silent shadower who was being trained, despite him not saying a word the entire time. This was a situation in which I really had wished that I was not walked over, and I wish that I had kind of just interrupted them and had been blunt and said, hey, I'm the interviewer, like, please refer to me for all these things. So how do you handle these situations? You want to break the cycle, but you also don't want to seem difficult or piss anyone off. There's a fine line. So you can't really succeed without standing up for yourself. That's just a matter of fact. There are ways to be assertive without being abrasive. this subject is being asked to take notes. So many of you might have been in a situation, if you're more junior, that you are in a meeting and you are constantly being asked to take notes. As many of you know, it's probably pretty hard to be focusing on the actual content or contributing, let alone if you are vigorously typing notes verbatim. So when you're asked to take notes consistently, and this isn't just a one-time thing, this is if it's a recurring instance, don't let it become a precedent. So basically stop it before it becomes too much of a pattern. Also, don't attend meetings where you're not either crucial or significantly learning. So this is something that really depends on the company, but in my experience, attending meetings with 30 plus people that aren't really team meetings, people start zoning out, they're not really crucial, and that's usually the situation in which they start asking other people who are not crucial to take notes. So if you're not crucial to it, I would just recommend not going to that meeting. If you are crucial to it, make that known. And that goes into what you should do. Say, hey, I'm running this meeting, or I'm going to be heavily involved in this meeting. Can someone else volunteer to take notes? Or if this keeps continuing and it's the same person asking you to take notes over and over again, say, hey, it'd be great to rotate note-taking responsibilities across the team so that everybody gets a chance to participate. All right, so what happens when somebody takes credit for your idea? Maybe it's in a meeting or it's in a Google Doc or something like that. Don't be silent about it. This sets a precedent. They will think that they can do this all the time. And it is definitely something that is really, really important for your manager to know that you are doing great work. So do say, hey, if this is in a meeting, I'm glad you agree with my idea. Do you have any additional thoughts on how to make it better? This is a good way of gently nudging them, acknowledging that you were the one who made it and you're open to suggestions. If someone kind of uses your idea but misrepresents it in a meeting, you can say, hey, let me elaborate on what I meant when I suggested that idea. If it's in a Google Doc form, put your name on it, right? Just say, hey, I'm the owner of this. Feel free to contact me. And lastly, if it becomes a significant enough problem, make sure your manager knows it was your idea and just talk to them in a one-on-one. Okay, what happens when you get interrupted in a meeting? Don't be silent about it. It will definitely make you look more junior than you are. You might think that this is to avoid awkwardness, but at the end of the day, it's really important to actually get your point across and to show people that it's not okay to talk over other people. What you should do is say, oh, I saved time at the end of the meeting for questions. So if you could hold off till then, that would be great. Or you can kind of interrupt them back and say, hey, to finish my thought, and then continue. If it tends to be something where they seem to be digressing a little bit from the main topic, you can say, hey, we're running short on time. Let's take this conversation offline between you and me. And lastly, if this has become a very, very systemic issue with the same person, I would pull them aside and have a conversation with them and say, hey, have you noticed that sometimes you speak over me in meetings? How can we work together to kind of prevent that? A lot of the time, it's not intentional. They're not trying to harm you, but it is a workplace practice that will really impede your efficiency at work. And so you want to make sure that you are being very honest with people without being, what people may think is aggressive. All right, what happens when you're not being addressed? Just like that earlier example I gave you of, my interviewee not really addressing any of the answers to me. Don't be silent about it, as the other ones. Do say, I can answer that, before the person that they are addressing tries to answer it when they don't have all the context. Another thing you say is, oh, yeah, I'll take that as an action item for myself since I have that context. Another way to phrase it is, I'm the point of contact for this product, so let me know if you have any questions. And finally, if this happens consistently and it's time to escalate to your manager, just ask your manager, hey, I would love for you to be an ally. This person tends to do this a lot, and they tend to defer to other people in the room when I'm the one speaking or I'm the one presenting. Can you make sure that if they do defer to you, just speak up and say, I'm going to defer to, my report, who has done all the work for this and knows the best. Hopefully, ideally, everyone has a good enough manager that they'll already do this. But if you are not lucky enough to have a great manager, just make sure that you're actively asking your manager to be your ally. All right, topic number 3, how to ask for help. Stop worrying about optics. I know it's easier said than done. So colleagues are your resources. They're not your competition. You really need to think about it like that. So have you ever really felt stumped with something at work, but you were way too afraid to ask for help? We've all been there, right? Maybe it's a dumb question. Maybe they'll think I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe they're too busy to help me anyway. What's the point in asking? Recognizing when to call in the big guns is a super important skill for your career. Whether you're on a time crunch, maybe you don't have the authority to make the right call, maybe you're just lost and you don't really understand the assignment. It's time to phone a friend. So at a certain point, you need to stop worrying about the optics, those like nagging voices in your head, and realize your manager should be there to help you. So use them as a resource when you need to. Okay, so don't go to them before you've taken a stab at the project, whether that's writing a spec or a query or anything like that. Maybe it's an interpersonal conflict with another coworker. Try to resolve these first before going to your manager. You want to put in that effort and not just go to them for everything. Secondly, don't spin your wheels until it's polished. So you'll definitely spread yourself thin trying to send, like if you have the idea of, I don't want to send my product spec to my manager until it's perfect, you're going to waste a lot of time and it might not end up being what they're looking for, which will end up hurting your team since it'll be a lot of wasted cycles. So do a very quick draft, share it with them and say, hey, am I on track? And then if they say yes, keep going. Also, don't abuse this by being the boy who cried wolf. It's great to ask for help when you really need it, but don't do it, 5 times every hour. All right, so what should you do? Definitely escalate if you're exhausted, if you've exhausted your resources and the timing is very urgent. Let's say there is a huge company-wide bug that you really need to resolve, and let's say your engineers are out of office and you really need another resource. Definitely escalate this to your manager, especially if the entire app is down. Do specify the specific need. What can the manager do to help you? So say, hey, I need one iOS engineer for Q3 to build this specific thing. It's going to take them the entire quarter. Here's a tech spec. Make it easy for them. So in terms of making it easy for them, basically do all the work that you can for them, right? Maybe even draft up an email so they just have to hit send. So if it's them asking for resources from your skip level, draft the email from their point of view and tell them why it's important. And lastly, form allies other than just your boss. It's great to have your boss on your side, but you also want other allies too, so you have a safe space to ask questions. Okay, so let's recap those 3 topics. 1, PM your promotion. Treat it like a product, right? This is something that is really, really important to you. You should be applying that same structure, that same communication, accountability, and persistence that you do with your products, that you do with your promotion. Second, call out bias, whether it's in meetings or in notes or in person. Do not mistake assertion for aggression. There's a way to be assertive and stand up for yourself and not be a doormat without being aggressive. And don't worry about those optics. And lastly, ask for help. But when you ask for help, make sure that you're making it easy on the person so that they're not shouldering too much of the burden. So with these 3 steps, you can start unblocking yourself in your career. You'll hopefully see better results in your effectiveness at work, interactions with colleagues, and hopefully even a better career trajectory.